They happen to you because if you've chosen this life to become an oak tree from an acorn, then you're going to need certain experiences to fulfill it. And those experiences, those things that are supposedly terrible things that happen, it's not about getting rid of them because they happened. It's about understanding. When you understand that there's like a lesson in the coding of your trauma, you then can unlock that lesson, and then trauma becomes your superpower. Powerful person is somebody who's willing to be vulnerable, because once you're willing to feel your feelings, you have nothing to be afraid of. It doesn't matter where you are or how evolved you are, or whether it's a good time or a convenient time to work on yourself or take up the path of healing, clearing trauma. Start. And also, if it's not going well, you keep going. It's the most important thing is to get in the game and do it.
An exploration of trauma, transformation, and triumph. Your healing starts here. And we're back with another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. Of course, I'm Amber, your host, and I have a very special guest with me today that I have so many questions for. I can't wait to ask him and get into a lot of his expertise. But let me tell you a little bit about him. This is Mr. Elijah Nisenboim. I've helped people suffering from trauma for over 35 years. You have 3 books on trauma. You've recorded 25 volumes of music that's made for breathwork. I mean, this is impressive stuff. Thank you so much for coming today and be willing to just share all your expertise. I'm excited for this conversation to get into this.
Great. Yeah, me too. I mean, my purpose for doing all this work is to share it. So it's my privilege to be here.
Well, I'm grateful that you are here. My heart really is just that people get healed from trauma. And I know I come out of fitness, and I know that with fitness, not one exercise or type of exercise works for every single person. And I think trauma is similar. So if you suffer from trauma, not every type of modality works for every person. But I think it's amazing when someone can come and hear all the different types of modalities, try these different things, and ultimately get healed and find hope again, because trauma can be a dark place.
Yeah, well, I'll frame what you say in a totally different way.
Okay.
For one, if trauma prevents you from living the life that you're meant to live, then you're trying to get from one side of the river to the other. And the modality is the boat. But the more important than the boat is the person you get in the boat with. So one thing I can say after 35 years is, I think when people are at the beginning of working, there's a lot of focus on the quality of modalities and techniques. And one of the things that I do, I mean, the one thing that I've been doing for 35 years, I haven't done anything else with my adult life, is breathwork. So, of course, I really believe in that boat. But a lot of people could take you across the river or try to in the boat. And I think not every teacher is meant for every student. But I can safely say, and not to be arrogant, I think that the breathwork, the reason why it's stuck with me for 35 years, because it works. It will work for absolutely anybody that tries it. It's that powerful, because breath is life, and there is nothing more important for your health and wellness than your breath. Like, you can't live without it, and you're doing it all day long, either unconsciously normally or consciously. So you can buy all the supplements in the world, or you can do certain practices for a certain amount of day, but your breath is what gives you life, and the access that it gives you, because of all your internal organs, your lungs are the only ones that you can operate manually. So the manual operation of your lungs is what breathwork is. It's just consciously choosing to breathe. And if you have inhale, exhale, left side, right side, nose, mouth, you have all the breath work techniques in the world, and then breath retention. But my particular technique, it's not subtle, because you're breathing really, really strongly through the mouth on the inhale for an hour without stopping. So it takes you to the location of where the energy got stuck at time of trauma. And that works every time. But getting in the boat to do it, like people do lead breath work differently and philosophically have differences. So I feel like what makes, I don't have I wish I could have copyright breathing. So every time someone breathes, I'd get like 2 cents or something. But, breath work is as old as man or old as people. My technique comes from, its origins come from India 5,000 years. So I don't own breath work, but the way that I do it is definitely how I distinguish effigy from other techniques.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the breath work is foundational to what you do and to the trauma that someone's experienced and stored inside of their body.
I would say this. If trauma are the unresolved experiences of the past, I mean, big or small, remembered or not remembered, you were left in your crib for 5 extra minutes and you thought you were going to die. We have no idea what is traumatic by perception, but most trauma is relational. It has something to do with you and another human being. So the most powerful thing in any modality that's trying to help a person release trauma is how they are able to heal that. And so the person you get involved with to help you is so important, because like people will say, okay, I'm going to work with this person because they're really famous or something. Well, you could pick different teachers, or you pick a man or you pick a woman. But if you're going to gain access to the place where the energy got locked up, you're going to come up against parts of you that feel under threat, and they're going to be relational, and it's going to be in relationship to the person that's helping you. So I would say for myself, after 35 years and tens of thousands of people, as a student and as a teacher, the most important thing is that relationship, because the human engine and the heart is what has been injured through trauma. And my breath work is in the center of the heart. But I think more important than the modality is that you're going to be confronting a lot of pain around relationships. So the person that's guiding you is going to be the first person that you're either going to feel safe or unsafe with. And even if you feel unsafe and they are a safe person, I'll say for myself as a teacher, it's my job to try to make sure that you understand that what's coming up is part of what you need for your healing. And if you can go through that, and you said you came from fitness, it's not necessarily no pain, no gain, but I would say that in the spiritual gym, you are learning how to tolerate the things that you buried. And it takes a certain stamina and endurance to be willing to feel the things that are associated with trauma. And that's where a good guide is going to remind you that it's okay to go through this. It's not going to kill you.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk just a moment. I know we've kind of given some definitions of trauma, but I would like to hear kind of your explanation of someone's listening and they're like, I don't know if I have trauma, or they say, I most certainly have trauma. How can they define that?
Yeah, well, I would say for the first 30 years, I didn't necessarily use the word trauma. The person who showed me a breathwork technique similar, he didn't use the word trauma, but during the pandemic, like, it's risen up, and I wrote this book, and it was 3 times as long. It only took me about a year and a half to get it down to 100 pages, because I wanted to define these things in such a simple term that anybody would be able to read it and go, oh, I can relate. I don't need to know anything to understand this. And 2, for them to have a visceral feeling reading the book, because reading a book isn't the same as doing the work. So I just start the book by saying, what is trauma? And if you are at birth an acorn, you are designed to be an oak tree. And every person, this is just my own philosophy, every person has their own unique signature, their own unique design. I don't mean like you're meant to be a king or a pharaoh. It's just a way that you are supposed to be who you are in your life. And at the time of trauma, because you can't process it, your energy gets locked up. And then the trajectory of you going from acorn to oak tree changes. So any experience, and a lot of it is pre-verbal, like before you're 2, like that are things that you could not resolve. It's not necessarily sexual abuse or or abandonment, rejection, a parent dying. Like those are big defining traumas for sure. But we also have to conclude conditioning as a sort of drip by drip trauma, because how you were told, conditioning at its best is how the caregivers around you or the adults want you to survive in a culture. So you're often encouraged to be something that is not standing out, but is what you need to do to fit in. So a lot of people, their biggest traumas is just being told not to be who you are, and being around people who also don't know who they are. So that's all that. I would say why I would call my book The Trauma Code is that you think, well, if I'm an oak tree and if I'm an acorn meant to be an oak tree, then why do I have experiences that take me off the path? But I think when we think about the journey of life, like a good movie, we wouldn't watch a movie that didn't have a conflict or a triumph at the end in some way, that the hero's journey. I really knew this right from the very beginning, just through observation, but I've been able to identify it more in my later life, which is that the traumatic things that happen to you are there for a reason. They happen to you because if you've chosen this life to become an oak tree from an acorn, then you're going to need certain experiences to fulfill it. And those experiences, those things that are supposedly terrible things that happen, it's not about getting rid of them because they happened. It's about understanding in what way they help to unlock your life purpose. So I would say that it's compost. It's not garbage, the things that have happened. So what we want to do is get back to where the energy is and unlock it so it's usable. Otherwise, and we all know this for ourselves and people around us, that if you live the adverse effects of trauma, you just keep repeating the same things, the same relationships, same relationship to money, to love, to health, all this kind of stuff. So when you understand that there's like a lesson in the coding of your trauma, you then can unlock that lesson, and then trauma becomes your superpower. And last thing I'll say is, and I'm sure you know this, is like you have children. When you get older, you realize, some of these terrible things were the most helpful things to me. That's where I gained my wisdom. And if it's basically that simple. If you can accept and see the value of what happened to you, you will not feel like a victim, which is what we feel like when we're in the adverse effects of what happened to us. Because as children, we didn't choose, so we do feel like a victim at that time, and we can't change or process. So
yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful mindset to have. I wish more people would adopt that type of mindset, and it's something that I fight against in my own mind and in my own life constantly.
Well, there's a magnetism people have when they're really negative and they're in that mindset. And even though you may be in a more positive mindset, if you get around someone who wants to bitch and complain about their life and all that, it can be very attractive in all the wrong ways. And then you start being negative even about that person. So being able to create your reality and go where you need to go is really, once you clear trauma, you still have the work of focusing on where you're going and not getting caught in all the traumatic energy around us.
Yeah.
People living unconsciously.
I had a friend that posted something the other day, and it was such a perfect example of what you're talking about, which is it was like a strawberry that had started to rot, and they put like the strawberry next to two more strawberries, and it showed how this started to decompose. The strawberry that was closest to that one decomposed, and then the next one. And it's so true, because if we are surrounding ourselves with people who are in that victim mentality, then it rubs off on us, and it keeps us from moving in the direction of healing and getting better and resolving the things that's inside of us. And another thing that I wanted to mention that I had just read before we jumped on here, I mean, literally, I think I heard this maybe within the hour before we jumped on this recording. It says, what you refuse to confront, you will never conquer. And that just hit me, because it's true. I think that so many times people have trauma, or they have experiences or things, emotions that they'll stuff inside, and they never deal with these things. And if you don't deal with them, I don't know how you can overcome them.
Well, they say you can't let something go that you're not willing to feel. I think that would be another way to say it. I would also just say, the power that we have, even the word conquer, it's masculine. And I think that our power is in our vulnerability, in the feminine. And I think our culture is sort of dominated by some masculine ideas. And like even people who lead breath work will lead it from this point of view of like fighting something. But I think that the most powerful thing a person can do is be willing to feel their suffering. I don't mean interminably like, hey, let's have as much as we possibly can. But the most powerful person is somebody who's willing to be vulnerable, because once you're willing to feel your feelings, you have nothing to be afraid of. I mean, 99% of what people suffer from is just not wanting, well, two things I say in my book, like the masculine side is wrong perception. Trauma makes programs so you see things wrong. That's one part. And the second part is we're averse to feeling our feelings. But as soon as you're willing to feel your feelings, it's not necessarily a conquering. I understand what you're saying, and so no disrespect intended.
No, I want to hear what you have to say.
I would say it's relational because it doesn't go away. The idea is just we don't pull up the tracks. Like you just stop launching the trains. Sometimes the tracks are pulled up. Like I'm amazed that certain things just aren't in my movie anymore, aren't in me. But the goal isn't to get rid of them or only surround yourself with people in the light or anything. It's being so willing to feel what's there that you don't incline toward wrong perception or being in the patterns that trauma provides. So it's not necessarily, it is a conquering, but it isn't from some really strong thing you're doing. It's more from a practice of acceptance in some way. And in my breath work, I've freed tens of thousands of people. Everybody hates it in a way, like, or loves it and hates it. It's very confrontational. And the only way you can get through it is to allow what's happening. You have to practice acceptance, because we live in resistance because of trauma. And when you start to do the breath work, that resistance will be up in 1 minute. And I on the front page of our website, we just changed our website only a week ago, and there's a 3-minute tutorial. It's free, of my breath work. I've been doing this for 35 years, and it's always been like 1 hour, and like I've kind of controlled that. But now we got this 3-minute tutorial, and like you can just see in 3 minutes, within 10 seconds, you're not going to want to do it. But if you do, you're practicing acceptance, because the thing that you're in resistance to is just your own energy. That's the one thing that I've learned over all the 35 years. So there's the only thing you're in resistance to is yourself. And in the mirror with other people too. So when you don't like somebody else's energy or the negative or whatever, it's in you somehow.
So do you think that, because I know you're using the word energy, do you think that this is like an energetic thing, even resistance, which is kind of what you're touching on here about, you don't really want to do it, but it's beneficial if we do it. But how many times do we feel resistance in a day? I think anything we're doing.
Well, there's conscious resistance and there's unconscious resistance. Conscious resistance is, well, look, if I say, look, go lie in the middle of the road and practice acceptance, there's going to be resistance. That is, you're going to be aware of that fear. But then there's just the automation and tension that people live in that they don't know about. It's in the way they breathe for sure, but it's in the way we move and in the way we think. And just to say, because there were a few things in what you said. One is about energy. The first step in the work that I do with breath work is to clear trauma and reconnect people back to who they really are, so the acorn can become the oak tree. But the second part, I've been to China more than 20 times, and I studied internal martial arts, Taoist movements, Tai Chi, all this stuff. So also just doing breath work, I understand something about energy. And I think that ultimately, like, we have physical energy, but our breath is a different, like, there's levels of what we are, from the most physical to the least physical. So when I say energy, I don't mean like I have energy. It's that you are a reflection of the life force of the universe. That's chi. So you your body is a reflection of that, but you're not your body. So if you begin to understand how your energy works, you can take the next step after clearing trauma, which is fulfill your life purpose. Because I think these are two different things. Clearing trauma is not the same as being who you are meant to be in your life, because there's work to do. And to tie this back to before is that we live in all this tension that we don't know about. We live in this resistance, and that resistance is because you clear trauma, you're still have all these habit patterns in the body that you have to retrain. And that's where I use other things like movement, because you have to understand how energy works inside you and how to teach your body to, well, the two main points I make in this book is about being grounded and centered. And these are literal places in the body and things that you can train in people, because the Taoists, which is where I have taken these movements from, it's 5,000 years old. It's really the smartest system there is. So teaching, when you get traumatized, the first thing to go is your ground and your center. And then someone else took over your center and you do not feel steady and sturdy, both not only in the ground, but also connected to God, like connected to spirit. So clearing trauma, you have to reconnect both up and down. That's grounding. And then you have to be able to go from you out to the world from your center. But if you've had a lot of violation or people taking over your center, it's very hard to move out into the world and maintain your own center. So these are complex things, understanding how energy is manifest and how to make your energy. Last thing to say, thank you for letting me ramble on and on. In fitness, in Western fitness, we develop strong core, we work on our muscles, these sort of things. But from a Taoist perspective, if you think like a fox can run 100 miles on little tiny legs with no muscles, or you watch a cat like looking at a mouse, if we can learn to separate our energy from our body, then we can be lazy like a cat, and we can do so much with our energy to fulfill ourselves without making hardly any effort. But most of us live in so much tension and resistance, and also conditioning to do things from the outside in. So then when we even get exercise, we got to run our heart rate up, and do all these things which really don't train your energy. It keeps you locked in these patterns of resistance.
Do you think that energy can be manipulated obviously by breath work, but by movement or by mindset shifts, or, is there different ways for your energy to shift?
Yeah, well, first I would say, mind is energy. And so it's certainly what you think. Because if I think, look, Amber's out to get me or whatever, and I would be talking to you in a different way in this podcast. But I would say in my breath work, I don't see the breath work as training anything. It's about clearing away the debris and opening up your energy. So it's not really, I don't use breath work we use the word manipulate, but to harness or cultivate energy. It's just for clearing and reconnecting, because when you're reconnected to yourself, you have much better, at least you'll be facing in the right direction, even if you haven't gone the journey. But the movements that I teach some of them in my classes, in my groups. I have a group with me. They're learning my system because it takes practice. It's one thing to clear trauma. It's another thing to become the master of your life. So I can't do that in one session. So I do use movement to teach you how to read, understand, harness, and cultivate energy. And that absolutely can be done, because, and I'm somebody did not live in my body, had lots of trauma, didn't have great health, and I'm 61 and I feel great. And I'm lazy and I don't exercise. So you too cannot exercise and feel great.
A lot of people love to hear that, actually. But
one of my Tai Chi teachers say, my style, little old lazy, lazy old lady. He said, when you drive your car, you don't want to run the engine at go 120 miles an hour all the time. Like you burn out the engine. So like part of it is you do have the lazy old lady. He would say, she has a little shot of scotch and she lives to 105 or whatever. That was my teacher's philosophy. And I'm the same. Like I'm like a domestic cat. Like I'm paying attention. My attention is out on things. I cover it with my energy as I'm doing, but I'm not going to do anything until I have to. Cats are lazy.
So let me ask you this. So say that you have someone who is their experience, daily emotions, we can experience multiple emotions throughout the day. So let's say that someone is depressed or sad, or they're just having a really bad day. Like it seems like a series of events have happened that's led them on this day that's bad. I'm sure you can manipulate that or maybe manipulate is not the right word, but you can control that a little bit more with breath work. Are there other things that you incorporate or you try to lead people into incorporating to shift that emotion?
Well, first of all, we're just in this weird, incredible time. Like when I started in 1990, there was nothing. Like I went to the health food store and took the books off the shelf and stuff. But now, like, if you want to try to do the life hack thing and like calm down, dealing with anxiety and worry and sadness just in the moment. Firstly, you could just Google and look up breathwork practices and take one on. Like, you're not going to hurt yourself. I mean, yoga people will say you can, like pranayama, you got to be really careful. I say, just try it. Be your own doctor, no problem. I think there's so many things out there. And I suppose in any relation, anytime someone gets in the boat with me, I'm going to look for whatever works for that person in the moment, but I'm not operating a factory, so I don't know. And you're asking a very hypothetical question, but I would say my interest personally, if someone ends up coming across with me, is the full transformation. And that involves a deeper level of commitment and sort of understanding of how your life is designed and shaped the way it's shaped, because you have a bad day. It's if you just want to get out of a bad day, I'm probably actually not the person to come to, because I can be very disruptive and unsettling even with all the love in my heart. But I'm the founder of my work, so there's facilitators, and my daughter, she became facilitator, and lots of people like working with her better than they would like working with me. But my specialty with breathwork is for clearing trauma. And at the essence of it, whether someone's working with me or with someone else, is to pull it up at its root. That's what I'm interested in, because I feel like, you are going to have, emotions, as you said, coming up every day, and things that will happen, and things that you don't know why they're in your life, or why, surprising things and whatever. And like, I want to help people to be autonomous with agency, knowing that they are the creators of the reality. That's what I'm doing for myself. So that's what I try to do with people who come into my world. And that's what I like about breathwork. It's very democratic. You don't have to be healthy to do it. You don't have to be spiritually aware. You don't have to be anything other than willing. Anybody who's willing gets something out of it.
How do you discover where trauma is being held in the body, or does it matter? When you release this through breath work, does it matter where it's stored?
Do you mean as a person with trauma?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this just to, like, inside my system, I have this thing called the 4 levels of mind and the 4 regions of the self. But the 4 levels of mind, what I say is that we think of the mind as the inner dialogue thoughts. But the mind is a processing mechanism. It has no consciousness of its own. It's just where thoughts come through. But we're trained, particularly in Western society, to value gaining skill from using that. But I say there's 4 minds, 4 different levels of the mind. So if you can understand, we can just very simply say the body mind. I call it the animal level of the mind, which is that your body has sensations, is giving you thoughts all the time. So knowing that I have just that alone, what I'm saying is, like, we're complex, right? Where we exist, because even the mind, like, where is it? So when people are going through the breath work, they have a lot of sensations specifically in the body. And actually, the introduction to my book, The Trauma Code, I do tell a bit of my own story. And one part of the story is that as a child, I played piano, and I was a musician in my 20s. I love music. I still play. But I had piano teachers who used to hit my hands with a ruler. Because I didn't practice. I mean, it's one thing not to practice, another to be hit for it. But I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I didn't tell my parents. But I had ideas and creativity inside me. And every time I went to go express those ideas, I would, particularly if I was in front of other people, my hands would turn to ice. I would freeze up. So when I first did the breath work, the first time I did it, it wasn't my technique, but it was the one that I got from my teacher. And my hands were in so much pain. And about halfway through the session, I thought he had put his hand over my mouth and was covering my mouth. And my own hands had hurled up into a ball, like full tetany, like rigor mortis, stuck in front of my face, and I couldn't move. And this was just that all this energy that had been stuck from being hit was pouring out, and it just got stuck in my hands, and it started to curl over. So there's no question that breathwork will show you where in your body trauma is stored, but it's really everywhere because of the way that we breathe or the way that we hold our body. There's in these 4 levels. I'll be very simple and say you have the muscular most outer level, but then you have the bones, ligaments, and tendons, which are like the sequential, they're like the train stations. These are the train stations, and here's the train tracks. And people get arthritis. This is the pathway to energy, the bones, ligaments, and tendons. So that's the linear mind. That's the one that everybody knows in the body, how you are in your structure, basically. And then the energetic level is your feeling level. It's your heart. It's the space between matter. And I call that the energetic level of mind. That's the one that everyone wants to learn about. It's like how to make energy move. And if a lot of these dudes that I practice with in China, they would do nothing and touch me and I'd go flying out. It's because they could release energy, and then the body would barely do anything, and you would feel the energy. So, and then the 4th level, to me, what I call the visionary level of the mind, is the projection. It's the intention that you hold before you organize in your energy or in your mind. It's the part of you that has vision that comes from beyond. And that's another mind. And there's animal movements that I associate to these. The third eye, the tiger, is I live next to a state park. There's mountain lions that can stalk me from 5 miles away because they have what the Taoists call yi, which is the projection of their mind, that they can actually read me while I'm here. Just 4 years ago, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It was wildfire season. I'm Northern California, and I was in the middle of a retreat with everybody crazy during the pandemic on line Zoom, and I had chickens. And I came out into my backyard, and there was a bobcat out in the field, and I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was a big cat, and I was like, "You get out, stay away from my property." And he stalked and he killed 8 of my chickens, and then there was blood and feathers everywhere, and I was heartbroken. And then I realized he came back the next day and finished them all off, and it was like he was just following. He knew exactly where I was the whole time. That's what tigers can do. So. Anyway, there's sort of an animal. The snake is the linear mind. Snake is like a mind, very cunning, secretive, changing. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. The whole idea of energy interests me a lot. It's a newer concept in my mind that I would say over the last 5 years or so that I've really kind of divulged myself into. So it's very interesting to hear that. And then also those, the 4 levels. That's interesting, and I've never heard that, but it makes complete sense.
When East came over to West in the 60s from India and everything, meditation became, in meditation still becoming mainstream, but we have this very, very singular idea about mindfulness and meditation that's about this one particular mind. But if you just sit and watch your breath and practice meditation, it's not going to, it's only one part of you. It's not even that important. But we value it so much that even, and meditation is hilarious because like you won't do nothing. But if I tell you it's a spiritual practice, like sit and just watch your breath and do nothing. Now you think most people think it's valuable, but us Westerners, like we don't do nothing. Like we don't know how to do nothing. But I think that when you sit and you meditate and you see your mind just like looping around or whatever, it's got a little bit of a transformational energy. It certainly shows you how insane we are. But there are other levels of processing, and this is my own system that kind of came to me and over my years of study, and that's really what I'm trying to teach people who work with me. It's how to harness those systems.
Can you tell us a little bit of like what makes this different than say like a Joe Dispenza or it just meditation in general? What sets it apart?
Well, I had a student who said that he thought my breathwork was meditation on steroids, but because when you sit and you watch your breath, like there is nothing sort of going on, but when you do the breath, I could demonstrate it for you if you want, but since we have echo cancellation, you may not hear me, but basically you're breathing in your chest as full as you can through the mouth on the inhale. So it's like, for an hour. You're laying on your back and it's guided, but suffice to say, it's not subtle. So when you start to breathe like that, it is a meditation in the sense that we think of vipassana, like meditation as the most that Buddha did before he became awakened, is by watching your breath and watching your mind, you realize you are not the breath of the mind. You can watch them. So that's a state of meditation, is being in that witness position. That's part of the practice of meditation. And it is a practice of acceptance in a sense, because if you just sit and watch, like, you're driving and like someone cuts you off and you're like, look at like fucking asshole or whatever, your mind, if you can watch these thoughts and not identify, you realize you're not your thoughts. So, but you're allowing them. During meditation, you're allowing them. But the thing that it doesn't do is that this gets a little complicated, but trauma is protected by the mind. I mean, I can explain how this works, but maybe it's just too much information. But just suffice to say that the programs that we have in our mind, like, I'm looking for evidence that I'm going to be abandoned. So maybe Amber's going to abandon me. Like, that's what the mind does. So when you sit and meditate, you're never going to get past that guard of the gate. I mean, there'll probably be some meditation teachers and people would say that I'm full of shit. That's not true. But it's not, it's a very slow path anyway. And I meditated for years, good 10 years I meditated, and I still love it. I love to sit and meditate. I think it's a profound practice. But if you want to clear trauma, you have to get past the mind, that mind, because its only job is to make sure that you never come in contact with the pain of trauma. So when you're doing my breath work, you will go past that mind as long as you're willing to breathe. You will definitely experience the resistance of the mind. So when my student said meditation on steroids, he just meant like it's such a fast track because the confrontation is immediate. And if you just sit and, even if you can, most Westerners can't sit for 40 minutes is like a time, but most people can't even do it for 5 minutes. So I think there's sort of what's the word? Like a little bit of a misunderstanding. Like we're slapping on something that comes from 3,000 years ago in India onto Western culture and say, oh, just sit and meditate and like you're going to transform. I don't think so.
So is this something you do with like one-on-one, or is this something that you do in a group setting?
The breath work?
Yes.
I'm in a moving river, so it's changing all the time. Like I try to keep it alive. So this year I've been doing, there's people who train in the breath work, so that's done with me, but the training is a personal development program. So there's people who come for personal development, people who come for breath work. And I've been leading this since like 1995. So it's a long time. But this year I decided I would limit it to the amount of people, because what I realized is that if you're working with 50 people, you can't really pass a transmission because people need very individualized feedback and guidance. And I'm best with that. I'm good with having relationships with people, and I have a lot of stamina for that. So I limited my group to 12 people this year. So I have 12 people who are with me till the end of October 2025. And then as far as my public offering goes, I'm sort of feeling it out. So this particular class is 3.5 hours. So 10, 15 minutes of movement, explanation of the breath work, short break, and then we come back, and then I give feedback. And to me, that's my joy, because the breath work's one thing, but the interpretation of it is another. And having the time to show people their trauma code, show people how their life is reflected in the breath work, is the most profound thing that you can kind of get from me in a public setting, because I have worked with tens of thousands of people, but there's nothing I haven't seen. But I can see, even online, every part of a person's energetic makeup and its manifestation in the way that they breathe. And to get that information from me is useful. So that's the best way to work with me. But I do a newsletter. It's 4 or 5 times a week, but there's a free forum and there's my book. So there's simple ways to get in. And then there's this public offering. But after that, with me, it's more involved.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that sound frequency, does that have anything
That's
to
an
do with
incredible question, talking to a musician. So were you asking that because, I know about music, or where's your question come from?
Well, I'm asking, yes, because you do music, but also it's something that has also intrigued me, how sound frequency affects energy, and it's something I don't really know a lot about, so I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I would say for me personally, in the breath work, it's sort of my secret sauce. There's music always being played in the breath. And my teacher of the breath work, his grandfather invented the radio, and he was a DJ on a pirate radio station off the coast of Britain in the early 60s, because the BBC wouldn't play the rock group. So he and I had this incredible connection around music, and we'd use music. Sound comes from silence. The Hindi say sound not a Brahmas, sound is God. For me, music has been the fastest path to the divine for me personally. And I feel like it's such a powerful tool in the music. But around 2012, I just kind of got tired of playing other people's music, and I was trying to find things that were not entertainment based or narrative, because most music is like, listen to me sing this song, or even for film music, you're narrating a score. I wanted music that was profound and evocative that you wouldn't notice. I started to create my own music. Inside my work, I say that there's 6 stages of the breath work, and each stage has a certain kind of feeling to it, and there's music to go with it. So I did 18 volumes, like 1 hour breathing albums, and then last year I made 6 albums, one for each stage of the breathwork. If you go and listen to the first album, Going Up, it's got this sort of rising qual. All the tracks are fitted for that. I feel like sound is the highest expression of language, and the language of the divine. And if you can match, or to help somebody to release emotion, or there's just so many ways to do it. I mean, before I got on the podcast, I have a recording studio in my house. I have 3 pianos. I have about 25 guitars. I studied Indian music. I have tamboras. My garage is like a complicated little labyrinth that I have all my fun in. So I'm always making music, because I feel like that's my favorite thing is when I'm with people in the breathwork to give them this beautiful companion to help.
I feel like anything to do with energy is like a modality that it's natural. It's completely natural. It's completely goes right along with our own human makeup. I encourage everybody to try to figure out, why not exhaust all of the natural options before you go into trying any other thing. I think this is fundamental. It's like, this is where
you mean
people
like
should start.
Western medicine or something, like taking antidepressants or
Well, certainly
they have
there's natural medicines too that I think, if you can exercise tap into the energetic force and fix things that way, to me, that's even better than having to indulge in even plant medicines.
Right. Well, I can give you my controversial opinion about plant medicine. But before, I'll just say, if I break my arm, I'm not going to play music. I'm definitely going to go and go to the hospital and maybe take some Tylenol or something. So I think there's a value to even plant medicine, like whatever. It's just a boat. So, if it gets you across the river, great. But I think where the problem lies is when it comes to sort of the Western modalities, like Western medicine, psychology, this sort of thing, is that people don't know that there are things that are just as effective and in fact possibly more effective and more powerful. So that's one thing. And then when they think about it, they think of it in this really super woo-woo way that it's like, I'm going to just get some crystals or something and then do some Reiki. Like I'm not of that world either. I'm pretty practical. Like I raised 2 kids. I own a home. I've been running a business. I had a center in San Francisco. So I've seen it all. And I'm in Northern California. So really I've seen it all. And then when it comes to sort of in the more modern times, like plant medicine's become this thing, and ayahuasca particularly, but there's others as well. And I would say a couple things. One, so many people that have done my breath work say who've done plant medicine say it's exactly the same without the medicine. So many people have told me that. So then why do you need the plant medicine? And the thing is, you're trying to heal trauma, so you're trying to become empowered. And if you take something on the outside, then you are the passenger of it taking you on that ride. It's not inherently empowering. But if you're doing breath work and you're hating it and shit's coming up and you keep breathing, you're going to transform and you're going to feel like you're the man or the woman or whatever. And to me, that's what we want. My controversial opinion is, first of all, nothing wrong with psychedelics, all of them. And I've done them and I know what the value is. But I would say that over the years, the people that I noticed people are very religious about it. And that already is sort of a red flag because it's just a boat. So when people are very religious about plant medicine, it's more mind. It's just more thoughts. There's something beyond that. So that's number one. Number two is that it's when they do the breath work, all of that medicine comes out. I can smell it. I can feel it. It's in their breath. It's in their skin. And the reason is that if you're going to do something like that, it's going to meet you at the level of consciousness that you're at, meaning where you are in your path, like how evolved you are. Like you're not going to evolve your consciousness wherever level you're at in your understanding. When you take psychedelics, it's going to meet you with that. So if you can't process that, then it's going to remain stuck in your body, just like trauma. And so to me, there's a law of diminishing returns with all external stimulations and substances, in that the more you do them, the less effective they are, and the more they just kind of accumulate inside your body. And so I have a feeling with people who've done a lot of plant medicine that they get, it actually can really make you stuck, because you just accumulate all this stuff in your body and you don't know how to process it, just like trauma.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you said that, because I get a lot of guests that will come on to this podcast, and speaks very highly. I've actually personally never experimented with, any kind of
I can tell.
psychedelics or anything. Why? Because I don't know anything about it. I'm curious.
No,
No, I mean, it's very, it's something that is curious to me. And I do feel like
you have a very simple heart, and I can feel that about you, and you're not going to complicate it, whatever you work with in your own stream in life. I feel there's a simplicity to you, and it's one of your strengths. So I don't think you're going to go and do plant medicine, because that will make your universe more complicated than it needs to be. Your healing is not complex. So plant medicine, yeah.
you're one of
So
the
that was
first. Yeah, and I'm glad you clarified that because I was curious, but I think you're probably one of the first guests that I've had on here that has given a real, just like a non-biased approach to that. And like, again, I'm not opposed to it if it's something that helps people and they can break free from, especially things that are harming them on a daily basis, like addiction or something that's, that's detrimental. It can be life-threatening to them. It's the same thing as breaking your arm. If I broke my arm, I want to go to the doctor and get a splint. There are times and places to use, doctors and Western medicine and plant medicine even. But I just am of the belief that if I can fix things with more natural, like let's try all the natural things first. Then if I still can't fix things.
Well, they would argue that it is natural. It's a plant, and the plant is the spiritual teacher, like in it's plant medicine. How do we know what somebody needs for them to fulfill their life? Like, we have no idea.
Right.
There's people with PTSD from being in wars and things like that, and then they take psychedelics and like they just sort of see beyond the matrix of picking up a gun and shooting someone, or whatever that is. And I think we were probably in agreement that we're not here to say you should or shouldn't do it. But I feel like the reason why you asked me the question, why you're saying what you're saying, is that there's a religiosity to it, and people just sort of say blanket like it's a great thing and you should do it. And I think there's something sort of religious about people, and that doesn't mean that everybody who does it or the shamans or the people who lead these ceremonies are like this, but I think like everything is only as useful as it's going to be useful. Is a gun dangerous? It depends how you use it. Is plant medicine? I did acid when I was in my 20s, LSD, and it was unbelievable, and I remember sitting on a couch for a week afterwards, just processing the experience, but I never did it again because I got the message. There are other realities. This is just a thin little sliver of the reality. Is I'm interested, at least for my path and my work with other people is grounded and centered. Like, I've been managing the sacred and the mundane for my whole adult life. I've never not had my mundane life be, my living has been sacred work for my whole adult life. So I've been managing like personal things with professional things the whole time. And I feel like the thing that people can do that I'm best at helping them is being grounded whilst being sacred. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Why don't you tell my audience, if they did want to get connected with you, how could they connect with you?
So there's a free forum that we have. I mean, everything's on our website, Effigy Breath. Yeah, I think even effigy.com, EFFIJI. Those are the simplest ways to contact me. And then, there's my book, and there's classes, and there's 2 audiobooks out. I'm not that hard to find.
Is all of this through your website? People can find you through your website?
Yeah.
All of that will be in the show notes. So for people that do want to find you, very interesting work and very in-depth as well. So I encourage anybody that wants to know more, definitely check him out. And then another question I wanted to ask is, if you had kind of like a big takeaway or something you wanted to leave my audience with, what would that be?
Sure. It doesn't matter where you are or how evolved you are, or whether it's a good time or a convenient time to work on yourself or take up the path of healing, clearing trauma. Start. And also, if it's not going well, you keep going. The most important thing is to get in the game and do it. You can start wherever you are. Nobody's more evolved than anybody else. It doesn't matter. We all have our work to do.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Elijah. It's been such an enlightening conversation. And, if people have questions, maybe they'll reach out to you and just ultimately get healed. That's what we're all here to do. Help each other get to that place of living a life that's whole and happy and full and, I don't want to say trauma free, because I don't know that we're ever trauma free, but
maybe free of the effects of trauma.
There you go. I love it. Thank you so much. Hey there, friend. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time here with us on Through the Trauma podcast. Your presence means more than you know. If this episode has spoke to you or gave you hope or made you feel just a little bit less alone, then I would love it if you would take a second, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who truly needs to hear it. Every share, every comment, every listen, it all helps our message get out and reach those who truly need it the most. Healing happens inside of a community, and together we are breaking the silence and creating space for transformation. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You are not alone.